ERi-TV, dear viewers, again, welcome to our program where we are bringing you on a daily basis the daily developments of the ICES 2025 with various interviews that we are conducting with the panelists, the presenters on the various topics that are being presented here at the conference. And today is the 6th of January 2025, the final day of the conference. So please do stay tuned with us as we present the rest of the program for this evening.
I think this conference was organized after several years next to the last conference, which was held in 2016. Now this has taken a long time, but I think it has been well organized. People who can contribute for the conference have been invited from different parts of the world, from Europe, the USA, Africa, and from within the country as well. So I think the gathering here is monumental, and we have got so many papers, and the organization was done from within and from outside, because we have collaborators in different parts of the world who assisted us in different areas.
My name is Edward Dennison. I'm Professor of Architecture and Global Modernities at the Bartlett School of Architecture, which is in University College London. And the presentation that I gave was a development on the work that I've been doing with the Asmara Heritage Project over the last 15 years or so. And the title of it the paper itself was looking at decentering modern heritage and the way that Asmara has been pioneering in that pursuit over the last 15 or 20 years. And the feedback I've had has been very positive. It's been a pleasure, obviously, to be at this conference. It's the third time I've been to this conference. I was here in 2001, 2016, and again this year. And so the presentations that we gave in our panel were all from the Asmara Heritage Project, different aspects of the way that Asmara has been researched, has been prepared for UNESCO, and then was successfully inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And what I was trying to do was to develop the thesis, the argument that we've been presenting both to UNESCO but also more widely, globally, as to how Asmara has played this leading role in trying to critique the way that modern heritage is often portrayed as a European phenomenon from a European perspective. And Asmara is an Eritrean city and has very distinct Eritrean characteristics. So it's a useful example, I think, for other countries outside of Europe to see how modern heritage contains these intrinsic indigenous localized characteristics and how valuable they are. I mean, Asmara is it's pioneering internationally for the reasons I've described, and it's a useful example in, as I said, challenging the Eurocentric perspective of modern heritage, but it's also pioneering, I think, within Eritrea. I mean, it was Africa's first modern heritage site, and it's Eritrea's first UNESCO World Heritage site. So there are obviously precedents that now can be considered for future World Heritage sites within Eritrea. Keren is an extremely beautiful city, which is, I know they're undergoing their own research now to consider nomination for UNESCO. And they should be pursued, because it's important to understand what are the attributes, what are the characteristics of a city that make it or have outstanding value to humanity. So Keren would need to determine what those are and then present their case to UNESCO, which would be a very interesting one. I think also Massawa would be a wonderful opportunity. Of course, Massawa has faced years of relative underdevelopment and needs some sort of economic development, and that's a big question over conserving Massawa. What do you conserve? What do you preserve? What do you hope to develop? What is the future of a place like Massawa? But as a city that represents quite complex regional and even global trade routes, Massawa, I think, has a fascinating history which again needs to be better researched and more understood and potentially presented for UNESCO. I would also add, though, it's not just the cities. I think the archaeological discoveries that they're making in Adulis and the way in which more understanding of what occurred on the coastal areas of Eritrea in around Adulis and their interactions with the hinterland and more globally with the trade routes that they were connected with. stand a very strong chance of UNESCO World Heritage listing. And again, it just requires that team to not only do the research that they're doing, as we were doing in Asmara 10, 20 years ago, but then reformulating that for UNESCO. And I think that would stand a very strong chance. Well, I suppose in the context of Adulis, also the way it connects to other archaeological and built heritage sites like Kwahaito, and that for me is particularly interesting because the techniques that were used to construct the buildings that we're now finding in Adulis and to some extent in the highlands, they are also reflected through the modernist heritage in Asmara. And I think that's one of the strongest things that makes Asmara a heritage site unique to its place, that they are intrinsically Eritrean. The materials, the local skills, the labor, the knowledge, you can see it going back 2,000 and more years. And it's not just modernist in a architectural or colonial sense, it's intrinsically Eritrean in a very sort of in a strong sense of deep time, going back millennia. So the more we learn about the coast and Adulis, the more we understand about the modern heritage too.
My name is Dr. Sabaean. I'm from the Archaeological Heritage Research Branch from the Commission of Culture and Sports. And this conference 2025, together with my co-authors, Professor Lorenzo Ruc and Professor Benvenido Martinez Navarro, we presented the 30 years archaeological and paleontological research from the Danakil Depression of Eritrea. In this presentation, we presented the activities, the results of the last exhaustive research works of the prehistory of the basin. Eritrea have been known for this kind of results from the late 1994. And the research work have been very important in Eastern Africa and in the world, with the finding of the 1 million cranium of human ancestor and other stone tools and mammals, some of them extinct, some of them with their descendants until the present times. And the project is running, is going, and these are two sisterly projects there. One is the Buya project, where we are engaging in this project from 1994, and the other sisterly project, which is much more younger, is the Ngalila Ramut project. We are working on this project with our partners from Spain, and these two projects are in a separate basin, but the information they are earning is very, very important, not in terms of this nation and the region, but at international standards. Research are going, and the results are really offering a lot of information in the paleoanthropological research.
My name is Marco Fioravanti. I'm full professor of legal history at the University of Rome. And yesterday I spoke about the civil code of 1909 for Eritrean people, wrote by an Italian jurist called Mariano D'Amelio. Mariano D'Amelio was a jurist and judge that used to live in Asmara and in Massawa from the end of 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century for 6 years. And it's a small period, it's a brief period, but in that period he organized the justice in Eritrea. He wrote 5 codes, but doesn't work. I mean, the idea that we can have a code, a civil code, a commercial code, a penal code, only for Eritrean people, wrote by Italian people, doesn't work. So I think, and D'Amelio think about this, that in the Italian colonization, in the first period, before the fascism, they try to organize the local laws with Italian laws together. With the fascism, the thing changed, because the fascists want to strike the Italian law against the tradition, Eritrean laws, Eritrean customs. I received a lot of feedback because we had a debate, a great debate yesterday, and I like to continue this research, maybe if I come back to visit the Eritrean archives. I'd like to do, because we have a lot of materials in archives of Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Rome, but we have a lot of sheet in Eritrean archives. So I hope to come back to continue my research.
So my name is Isaias Tasfamarem. I came from the US. I work at Stanford University. This is the conference, International Conference on Eritrean Studies. This is the second time. The first one was held in 2016. I was also here this time in 2025. I also came to present one, which is the National Public, the title is the National Public Diplomacy, its activities, lessons learned, and its future plan from 21 to 24. So in PG, the aim is to, first of all, just brief context, to have a context. The first Eritrean came to the United States in 1924. This is documented, not hearsay or family story or whatever. We know exactly when he came, what's the name of the ship, the name of the record of the ship, the person, and also where he lived in the 1940s, for example, through the U.S. Census and stuff like that. So basically what we're saying is Eritrean Americans have been in the U.S. for 100 years in 2024. So what do we have to show for within that 100 years? I mean, there are a lot of things that were done. National public diplomacy is not new. Before independence, there were a lot of activities to send to the liberated zone and stuff like that. So all of that was done. So it's nothing new what we're doing. But what we're doing now is a little bit different because we want to make culture in a bigger sense, sports, food, music, clothing, literature, all of that is under a lazy way of saying it, under culture, using that as a strategy, main center, and then promote Eritrean soft power. That's what it is. But we have to be careful so that that soft power or that public diplomacy should not be construed as propaganda, because propaganda in soft power, depending on who is listening, could be interpreted that way. So the challenge for public diplomacy participants or who work, volunteer, all of us are volunteer workers. So we need to be careful how we present Eritrea to Americans. So we do that through culture, and then at the same time not to make it into look something different other than public diplomacy. So that's making it central. We were able to do a lot of accomplishment. So we are telling our own story. We're creating a magazine, online magazine and print magazine every 3 months. So I think we've published almost 13 of them. With 600 pages of history. So we start with archaeology because that's the comparative advantage we have. And then, wildlife and all that. And then young people are joining and contributing, writing to that. And then we have a newsletter monthly. That's about 33, 34 issues. That's about 300 pages. So 16 pages per each newsletter. So a total of, since we started basically mid-March 2021, we've published over 15,000 pages. I mean, about 1,000 pages. So and then we created a brand, and the brand, we need to tell. So one of the things is that we have to tell our own story. Nobody's going to come to you and ask you what you're doing. So we have to go and tell our story. So by telling our story, you have to be proactive. So the magazine is one of them. Website, there were only 2 websites in the U.S., in 2 cities, but now 20 cities, because there are over 53 cities that the Eritreans reside in the U.S. So we need to. So the second, third generation were born in Eritrea now, in the U.S. Are some of them lawyers, judges, scientists, and all that. So we need to harness all that power. And then, because otherwise, if it's diluted, everybody's doing, whatever, different things, then we don't have that collective power. So, because since this is our collective memory, our collective history, so I think we need to be able to do that. So, the challenge is that, but we have to keep continuing doing it. And then eventually, if we can institutionalize that and have our kids or grandkids, whatever, become mayors and governors and stuff like that since they are born. And this is a third, fourth generation since the first one came. So I think that's our measurement and that. And what the matrix would be when an Eritrean start talking about Eritrea. That's a good measurement that it has transformed from public diplomacy to non-propaganda, because otherwise it would be proper. But things like Binyam Girmay having this, all cyclists. It's not one person. If it was not only Daniel Taklahaymanot and nobody else, then it would have been different. But since we have a whole lot of cyclists winning different things, that's in cycling, Eritrea has put its signature. So we need to put Eritrea's signature in science, technology, literature, law, fashion, music, and all that. So that could be done through public diplomacy and understanding what, and strategizing and putting culture as a strategy at the center of public diplomacy. I would say that would be a success.
My name is Ms. Hermela Mahari from the Commission of Sports and Culture, and I represented a paper on the graphic similarity between the schematic rock art and the Proto-Sabaean alphabets around Adulis. This research paper is a preliminary research paper that tries to highlight the relationship between the advanced stage of rock art and the Proto-Sabaean or the earliest Sabaean inscriptions in Eritrea, and it opens a hypothesis that the Sabaean inscriptions or the South Arabian inscriptions, as believed that they have came from across the Red Sea from Yemen, they could have a regional or a local influence in Eritrea. It calls for another research.
The papers are so diverse. I think we had about 153 papers. And the presentations were done in 7 conference venues. All of them were packed with participants. And I think the topics or the themes that were presented were so diverse and quite interesting that people were bothered to make a choice between one presentation and the other. So if you attend one presentation, you miss the other 6. So I think it's really thrilling, and the presentations are so diverse and timely, educational, and I think the nation will benefit at large. And the other thing is our youth also participated very well, and I think everything has been communicated to them. There was an overwhelming number of youth representing from the different ministries, institutions of governments, the private sector, and so on. So I think overall it's a great achievement for the country, and this everyone hopes that it will give a good picture of the country, the real picture of the country.
My name is Tej Dhar. I am a professor in the Chitrakoot School of Liberal Arts, Shulini University, India. And I came here to present a paper on Alamsagat Tasfai, which is the writer as a historical subject. The burden of the paper is to show how Alamsagat can be seen in the larger context of global post-colonial literature. That is why, for a perspective, I chose to talk about 2 distinguished Indian novelists, Raja Rao and Mulk Raj Anand. Then I also made a mention of Chenua Achebe and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And the argument that I presented was that they were writers who witnessed the colonial times, and they were able to convince the people that they were strong enough to face the colonizer, to resist them, and also to know the truth about themselves. But Alamsagat went a step further, which is that he cast himself in a role which was demanded by the times, and for which I think the most ideal example we have is of Frantz Fanon, because Fanon was a doctor by training. He was in Algeria, and when he came to see how the Algerians were fighting for their liberation, he joined them. Unfortunately, because of his sickness, he had to go to the US, where he passed away soon after. But before dying, he wrote a letter to his friend telling him that if he had known that his death was so near, he would have stayed back and fought. And that's what Alamsagat did. He had a flourishing career in the United States. He could become a big researcher, but he gave up. He came and joined the warriors in Sahel, and he remained there till the country became independent in 1991. And the burden of this was to show that the kind of writing that he produced while he was there truly represents the Eritrean character, how the Eritreans thought of themselves, not as individuals, but as beings of a nation which was in the making, and how they fought that fighting the enemy is the only thing that matters in their lives. And then I explained everything in terms of how he wrote his stories, what kind of messages are there, how he wrote his short essays, what kind of message do they convey, and also about the plays that he wrote, which have a very strong post-colonial content in them. And at the end of the presentation, there were questions, not many, but I think there was more of appreciation for saying the things about him which nobody here had said before.
So this panel discussion was to honor Alamseged Tesfaye, who's the national treasure of this country. He's a good writer. I mean, he covers a whole lot of. He's a good lawyer. So he was a fighter. He left. He was in the U.S. And then he left his PhD studies to come and join the liberation movement here. And then, so he's a playwright, an author, a novelist, historian, lawyer, all of this. So, so the theme was that narrating history through public intellectuals. So there were two presenters, Dr. Taj, Professor Taj, talked about some of his books, mentioned in a very poetic, replied in a very poetic way, and my role was that to summarize the trilogy, which is the three different books that he has written on the political history of Eritrea from 1941 to 1961. Covers over 1,900 pages. I mean, it's hard to report on 1,963 pages in 25 minutes. But luckily, Professor Gabrahewat had written about the trilogy, maybe about 10, 15 pages a couple of years ago. So I went through it and basically agreeing with most of the things he said there. So, but he had recommendations and comments at the end. So I started with that. Some of the comments that he had written was that it should be translated into English, so which Alamseged is doing. It was supposed to be published in November last year, but now I think it will be available this month. So that would, the comment that Professor Gabrahewat had mentioned will be, and then is translated into other Eritrean languages. In Arabic it's translated, and Tigray it's translated. So, and then he was hoping that a lot of Eritreans read his books. Now, non-Eritreans, Eritrean kids who are outside, who don't read Tigrinya, could be available to them in English. So, because he wrote it himself in Tigrinya, and also 3 volumes in Tigrinya, and probably combined all the 3 volumes into 1 volume in English, it's a big task. So I think we need to honor him for all the works that he did and continue to do. So that's why we're here.
I have been coordinating the biggest conference hall, the Salam Hall, and it has been hosting diverse areas of presentations, and I think it was always full of participants, and the participation from the audience side was also marvelous. It triggered interest, and the topics that were raised, asked, commented on, I think they are very educational and will be of great value to the nation-building aspect of the conference. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
My name is Serena Massa. I'm working in Eritrea since 12 years. I'm the scientific coordinator and director and co-director of Adulis project, together with the Commission of Culture and Sports. The project was launched by the Eritrean government 12 years ago, and the archaeological site of Adulis is every year revealing the groundbreaking nature of this archaeological site regarding broad themes like the birth of urban civilization in the Horn of Africa. It is completely out-reversing the story because it has been long believed that from the highland came the civilization. But we have the proof in Adulis that a settlement existed there in the second millennium BC with three very, very close contacts with Egypt. It was the land of Punt, where Egypt searched for exotic goods, and it was a commercial hub since there. So it is really very, very important, but still not well known, and we are doing our best to make these novelties known. These novelties are based on archaeological facts, so they can be demonstrated scientifically, and this is the most important part of our work. So the reaction was really a very, very close interest. Much interest, but also some resistance, because the tradition of the study is from an Eurocentric and also Ethiopic point of view. But we are demonstrating the contrary. The questions were really about the relationship between Adulis and Aksum. So it is traditionally believed that Adulis is the port of Aksum. That means mostly between the 3rd and 7th century AD. Our archaeological excavation demonstrated that Adulis exists long before Aksum. So this has to be really understood and viewed in a larger vision. So it is a schematic representation of history that prevailed, and one of the questions from the public was just about this. In my presentation, I demonstrated with archaeological proofs that Adulis exists long before Aksum, and in the public, one asked me, you didn't mention Aksum. Of course, there are hundreds of books on this theme, but really, it is really a short period of Adulis story. In the Horn of Africa, civilization started from the sea, not from the highland. And this is a very groundbreaking novelty. And about the conference, I'm really honored to be here. It is an honor to be in this country because the way of share the working and share an ethic vision about work, I think it deserves our esteem, our profound esteem.
My name is Nelly Cattaneo. I work as an architect for the Politecnico di Milano in Italy, and I have a PhD in conservation of architectural heritage, and the topic of my PhD was on Eritrea. I started coming to Eritrea in 2012 with the Adulis project, so I've been working with Professoressa Serena Massa and all our Eritrean colleagues with this project that started also thanks, of course, for the will of the Eritrean government, and thanks to Alfredo and Angelo Castiglioni from Varese. Adulis and our presentation yesterday at this conference was about Adulis, which is rich from the cultural point of view and to retrace a more complex history of the Horn of Africa and about the relationships already in ancient times between the Horn of Africa and the Mediterranean and the East Africa. So it is a very pivotal area which needs a non-biased understanding of history and of cultural relationships. Our role, so the role of architects, we're not archaeologists, but the role of architects was explicitly demanded by Professoressa Massa and by Angelo and Alfredo Castiglioni, because you know that archaeological excavations must be destructive. I mean, you have to remove soil, and it is the soil that has protected the artifacts for centuries. So when you remove the soil, the artifacts are very fragile, and when they are exposed to rains, wind, the sun, the risk is that they are not preserved for future generations. So that's why one of the main will was to have conservators working along with archaeologists in order to preserve and safeguard the archaeological site, so that the work of archaeologists must be destructive, but some measures and mitigation measures are taken. And presenting our work to this conference has been a great honor, and the conference is rich. So attending as much as possible to the sessions is a privilege for us, because it gives us an insight on the rich Eritrean culture, which is always a surprise. Every year we find out new aspects of Eritrean culture, and we hope never to stop finding something new and understanding something more about Eritrea. And the feedback also of attendance to our session was impressive, because there is a strong will to understand better what Adulis, which is a very fascinating name, but not much is scientifically known about Adulis. So our effort is really to provide what evidence-based, archaeologically evidence-based information can, how they can support history and history-telling, but from a scientific point of view.
My paper today was called Eritrean Diasporic Participation in an Age of Sanctions, and what it examines is how the Eritrean diaspora's efforts to organize medical humanitarianism projects are affected by the United States government's economic sanctions. What I call the participatory U.S. Eritrean diaspora is ultimately interested in collaborating with the Eritrean state, and this is problematic for the U.S. government because of the way that it stands in opposition to U.S. foreign policy. And so what I'm interested in examining or analyzing in my research is how the power of the Eritrean diaspora to not only affect change when it comes to how we direct aid flows to Eritrea, but also the power that we have to draw on our own history of during the Eritrean Revolution, where we get this framework for collaborating with one another, whether it's due to, in bad times and in instances of, crisis, medical crisis or humanitarian crisis, but also for good things, and how we can think about the role that the Eritrean diaspora has already played, but is going to continue to play in nation building and in state building in Eritrea in the future to come. The primary sort of area of my research actually has to do with the underground medical network, studying the underground medical network of, the Eritrean Revolution, but not only from a historical perspective, but from a contemporary perspective, what are the legacies of having this be the foundation of our medical institution? How does it change the relationship between Eritreans and how we care about one another, whether it's in the country or, going out into the diaspora? And so I want to continue to build on this work, not only in areas of medical anthropology, but but also in political anthropology and cultural anthropology, how we think about the different kinds of models of collaboration between African peoples. I plan to continue this research as a professor. So I'm currently a postdoctoral associate at MIT. And as I mentioned, I want to continue on and become a professor and continue to do projects, as well as train other, especially train other Eritreans to go into academia as well.
My name is Seifa Berhe, and I have presented a paper on water resources, climate change constraints, and development options for Eritrea. So the thrust of my research has been that although we call ourselves, a water scarce country, the issue is simply because rainfall is erratic, but at the same time we haven't managed to create the storage capacity that, and when drought comes, we're not in a position to be able to supply water adequate for the population. So based on this analysis, selected 3 areas, regions within Eritrea. One is the Merab Gash Setit basin, the Asmara area, because it's very densely populated and has implications for water supply, and also the Red Sea coast. These 3 have different water resource requirements, but have also different ecosystem, realities. For example, drought. Certain of these areas have high density, whereas others have less density. Some are affected with recurrent droughts, some others with heavy floods. For example, the Red Sea area, heavy floods are inundating and destroying the livelihoods of the community. So the interventions we suggested is enhancing the capacity, storage capacity by building, I know the government has built so many micro dams and big dams, but we need to accelerate this in big numbers. Second is soil and water conservation measures. But also along the Red Sea, we have other options. Solar, saline, desalination plants that can, apportion, because the settlements along the coast will definitely be needing water. But then the amount of water that's coming from the highlands, which is being dissipated to the Red Sea, has to be somehow apportioned between the livelihood of the community, settlements, and for tourism and other purposes. I received a number of questions. Some people were telling me, why do you call Eritrea a water scarce country? And I was saying, simply because we've not managed our water resources adequately for a number of reasons. That's capacity, financial constraints, and so forth. And also we haven't developed storage capacity that is required for any eventuality, risk that may happen, severe drought. And then the second was, how are you managing, to create the database that you need, classifying all these river systems, not only these big basins, but sub-basins or sub-catchments. Simply, and those were, we put ranking. Certain areas may, because of government's intervention that they want to do possibly water supply for communities or agricultural concerns, those will be given a priority. But for others, they will have to wait till more investigation is done. But this cumulative of sub-basin level will ensure sustainability of water resources of Eritrea. The third was, how severe is the climatic constraints that you've been mentioning. Over the years, climate has changed. The amount of rainfall that has been, it's over 50 millimeters to 100 millimeters in the highland areas. And in the coastal areas, it has increased the last few years, but it was like below 100 millimeters. So we have to apportion between the areas that will receive a lot of water, combined with those that are high risk of shortage of water. We have to create a strategic plan on how to supply the water resources required for sustainable development, industry, tourism, communities.
Dear viewers, the ICES 2025 has closed its doors with its third day of deliberations on the 6th of January 2025. I hope you've enjoyed the coverage that we have been presenting you for the past 3 days. It is good night from us.